Welcome to this edition of Decoding Diplomacy with Manish Chand. Today we have a very distinguished diplomat and Pakistan expert in a studio, Mr. T.C.A. Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan. Ambassador Raghavan is a former High Commissioner of India to Pakistan. He earlier also served as Deputy High Commissioner. Before that, he also had a stint as Joint Secretary in charge of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. And he has written a much appreciated book called The People Next Door, The Curious History of Pakistan. So he's just the right person to talk about the subject we are discussing right now, which is Pakistan's role as a mediator in the US-Iran war, which has attracted a lot of headlines, controversy, and people are not sure what the precise reasons were why Pakistan was chosen to do this job. But anyway, the talks in Islamabad did not produce any deal. Some say it has collapsed. And it seems there is the deadlock continues with US threatening to impose a blockade. All that will come to that later. Ambassador Raghavan, my first question to you is, how do you look at Pakistan's role as a mediator? Why do you think Pakistan was appointed or singled out for this particular job at such a fraught time, and what were the expectations from Pakistan?
Well, I think the Pakistanis have certain equities which both the parties to the conflict realized were important and had a certain value. These equities are well known. First of all, it's a very important neighbor of Iran. It has very good relations with the Gulf sheikdoms and with Saudi Arabia. And in recent years, its relations with the US have been on an upswing.
Right.
And notwithstanding the severe downturn in US-Pakistan relations from about 2016-17 till about 2024. But before that, the US and Pakistan have often worked together in different situations. So those were certainly factors which played a role in Pakistan emerging as a platform for this mediation or meeting between Iran and the United States. It's also useful to recall that Pakistan played a relatively even-handed role in the crisis concerning Iran, US, and Israel. It was quite forthright in condemning the Israeli attack on Iran, while at the same time it had also taken a relatively strong position on the Iranian attack on the Gulf countries. So for all these factors, I think Pakistan's value as a mediator was perhaps visible to all the parties in the conflict, except to an extent Israel. But the real negotiation was always going to be between the United States and Iran. And to the extent that Pakistan does not have diplomatic relations or does not have any kind of relationship with Israel, also acted as a factor making it more acceptable to the Iranians. Quite frankly, I'm somewhat surprised at the angst which is there in India about how has Pakistan assumed such a role. I think to a very great extent, this angst is based on a certain conviction which has appeared in India in the past few years that Pakistan is geopolitically irrelevant. That has never been the case. I think we convinced ourselves because of the adversarial relationships we have with Pakistan and because of the downturn in India-Pakistan relations since 2000, the severe downturn since 2018, we convinced ourselves that it is internationally isolated and that we are isolating it and that it is geopolitically irrelevant. In fact, that was never the case.
Ambassador Raghavan, you are right partially there. But talking about the doubters in India, and critiques. Some say that, okay, yes, Pakistan is, of course, geopolitically important, as we can see it right now. But some question that how can a country, dysfunctional country, with a record of sponsoring, using terrorism as an instrument of state policy, and a country which is having its own war with Afghanistan, not war really, but is locked into a conflict with Afghanistan, given Pakistan's history of using terrorism as an instrument of state policy, how does it fit the billing? Because being chosen as a mediator gives a certain kind of, heft to Pakistan regional and global role. What would you say to that?
Well, I think in India we are insufficiently conscious of the fact that the war on terror is over. So the whole world does not look at developments through the prism of terror or terrorism in the way that they did. And the world will not see Pakistan through our eyes. They will see it through the lens of their own self-interest and their own assessments. They will certainly not go with what Indian assessments of Pakistan are. So while we may take the view that given the vast portfolio of problems that Pakistan has, both domestic and regional, that means that Pakistan is no longer has no capacity or bandwidth to play a major diplomatic role. That may be our assessment, but others don't share that assessment.
Right.
But the more important thing is, I think, the fact that we don't take into account the fact that the war on terrorism is over. And it ended some time ago, but it clearly came to an end with the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. To a great extent, our own policies have also changed. After all, till a few years ago, our own position used to be that there is no difference between good Taliban and bad Taliban. But now we have no problem in a pragmatic relationship with the Taliban, quite regardless of their past conduct, both against India and against other countries. So I think in diplomacy, one has to be clinical and not sentimental, because this is how countries conduct their diplomacy. They don't conduct it entirely on the basis of sentiment and past history, but they do so with a positive, forward-looking approach.
Yeah, you're right. But also, when you say the war against terror is over, clearly it's not over against India. We saw that last year, Pahalgam massacre, operations.
No, I'm not saying that we no longer face the challenge of terrorism.
Right.
We do, but that global umbrella, which provided the Indian war against terrorism to be seen as part of a wider international approach, that global umbrella no longer exists. We certainly we have faced the challenge of terrorism even before there was a global war on terror. We did so on our own in the 80s and 90s. It's unrealistic to expect, just like we had no expectation in the 80s and 90s that countries would take our view on the challenges we face. It is unrealistic to expect that they will take our view now.
Right. Also, there is another point of critique, which is this, that some would say that given India's excellent relations with all the parties, United States, Iran, Israel, and Gulf countries, India was perhaps better positioned to play the role of, if not a mediator, but a very important player in diffusing this crisis. What do you say? I mean, some probably people are equating the role of mediator with some sort of status in the pecking order. How do you look at that?
No, I think this is fueled by what I call the angst about, and this is an angst based on a certain internalization of an adversarial approach to Pakistan. That everything to Pakistan, with regard to Pakistan, is seen as a zero-sum game. It's like saying that if Pakistan wins in a sport in which we are not competing, it is still a defeat for us. So this zero-sum game mentality, there is really no answer to, because they will always feel that no, Pakistan has scored a point while we have not. But the more serious point as to why this role could not have been performed by India, now there are many reasons why it could not be. But one factor also is that we did not have a relatively even-handed approach in this latest crisis.
Right.
We were more clearly inclined towards the Israeli and the US position, and to some extent the Gulf Sheikdom's position than other countries were. So that certainly acted as a factor against us, but there are many other reasons also. And we should not also minimize the fact that Pakistan has been a major factor in Iran's regional calculus for a very long time, in a way that India is not, because Pakistan and Iran are immediate neighbors.
Right. Sir, other thing, the very vehement sort of attack, not attack, but, describing, like our external affairs minister described, we don't play. He said that we are not Dalal nation. What do you make out of that? What is a Dalal nation?
I'm unable to understand that comment. I think you will have to ask him to clarify.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. In the past, India has, ever since its independence, India has certainly played a major role in reducing conflicts. We were in the forefront in the 1950s, for instance, in the situation in Indochina, in Korea, in different parts of Africa, in West Asia. So there's nothing intrinsically wrong in ethical or moral terms in trying to bring about an end to a conflict which is clearly not in anyone's interest. And that conflict was hurting us to a very great extent. And the fact that it has come to an end is something which we should welcome, as indeed the Ministry of External Affairs also welcomed it.
True. Now, coming back to the collapse of talks between the US and Iran, what do you think? What was the major problem? Because it seemed that they are going to get there. Obviously, nobody expected in a one sitting, one session, although it lasted for more than 15 hours or 21 hours. We don't exactly know how many hours. But where do you think the possibility of bridging differences lie, going ahead? Because it seems that this war is in nobody's interest. It is quite clear. It has been devastating for the world economy, for the region and everybody. Do you think better sense is prevailing? How do you see this going forward?
I think you answered that question. No one expected the first meeting to lead to a spectacular Big Bang result. It's unrealistic to think that would have happened. The fact that such a meeting took place at all is a huge step forward. Let's not forget, it's only a few weeks ago that the entire political leadership of Iran was, in effect, assassinated by US-Israeli action. And there have been numerous attacks on Iran since then. Iran has retaliated equally viciously, targeting major infrastructure sites in the GCC countries. And it has had a pretty debilitating impact on the global economy, and even more so on the neighboring countries such as Iran, such as India, and others. So the fact that this meeting took place at all at such a high level is itself quite an accomplishment. I don't think it was realistic to expect agreement to emerge from it, which would settle all the issues. My sense is, one doesn't know for sure, my sense is that there will be follow-up meetings. And in the first instance, some kind of pragmatic formula will be attempted whereby this ceasefire can be prolonged a little longer. I think that perhaps will be the first goal which both sides will set for themselves.
Right, sir. When we talk about pragmatic formula, if you look at it, till some time back, both sides were playing maximalist game, that they had this whole list of demands from each other, which is narrowed down. And perhaps now, after the first session, where do you think 2 or 3 points on which both sides can converge, leading eventually? The first step, as you rightly said, is a prolongation of the ceasefire, that the ceasefire continues, sustaining the ceasefire. And the second is finding a durable settlement. How do you see that going forward?
Well, it depends on how you define a durable settlement. Clearly, the Iran-US relationship has so many different dimensions and so many fundamental differences of perception that no settlement will be durable for all times to come. But in the past, the Iranians and the Americans had agreed on certain arrangements for the next 10, 15 years with regard to Iran's nuclear program. Now, those arrangements cannot be gone back to in the same form as that they had earlier been agreed to, and from which the Americans had withdrawn, because in between there's a major conflict has taken place, and that conflict now has to be factored into that earlier agreement reached. We should not forget that so far, in the 40 days of conflict till it was paused by the ceasefire, neither side conceded that they had not achieved the upper hand. Both sides, in a sense, have claimed victory. In a way, that is a positive thing because that enables an agreement to be reached relatively more easily. But certain changes in the earlier arrangement with regard to the next 10, 15, 20 years of Iran's nuclear program, I think that will probably provide one basis for some stable arrangement to be worked out. Alongside this, there are even more fundamental differences between Iran and Israel, and we have to see how those differences can they reach, if at all, can they reach some stable arrangement. Perhaps in some senses, it will be easier for Iran and the US to reach some stable arrangement than Iran and Israel. And here also there will be extra regional factors which will impact that particular interface. Most of all, we have to see how much diplomatic capital has Israel exhausted in the Western world over the past year and a half, 2 years. Because on that, a great deal will depend on the future of the Israel-Iran relationship.
So when you talk about Israel exhausting diplomatic capital, one of the core issues is really this very strong mutual threat perception. Israel sees Iran as an existential threat. Iran sees Israel as an existential threat. What do you make out of it? Is it all to do with the nuclear bomb? What do we mean by an existential threat? Is it that both sides, for example, Iran does not have a nuclear bomb as of now, but Israel has one. So what is the way out? This is a major issue.
No, in these kind of relationships, there is no way out. There is no magic formula which will solve problems once and for all. Those kind of formulas don't exist in real neighborhood situations. The question is, can they come to some stable arrangement which will last for some time? It appears unlikely because their differences are too far apart, and particularly Israel acts in a manner in which it sees no constraints insofar as its policies are concerned. My own impression is that more constraints are going to emerge with regard to how the United States views Israel and how many important Western countries view Israel. And that may change the nature of how Israel conducts its policies. But that is just my guess. I may be wrong. The more important point is that after such an intense conflict, we don't quite know what kind of region will also emerge. What will be the nature of the new Iranian political architecture that emerges? What will be the kind of new Israeli political architecture that emerges? And most of all, what kind of impact will this conflict have in the medium term on how the Gulf sheikdoms conduct their affairs? All of these are questions to which there is no answer as of now.
So one of the key demands of Iran is demand for reparations. And one of the formulas which Iranians have proposed is that they're allowed to charge a fee, a transit fee from the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think this is a practical idea? Do you think some sort of understanding can be worked around that, given huge devastation wrought on Iran in this war of choice? What do you think? Is the demand for reparation justified? I mean, will that
be at this stage, at this stage of a at the beginning of a negotiation or in the early stages of a negotiations, the basket of demands which are put forward are quite large.
Right.
We have to see what is retained and what is given up. At this moment, it is difficult to assess how much weightage Iran will assign to this. But
Right.
one reality has changed. See, one political reality has changed. It may change again, one does not know. But what appears so far is that Iran has now had to invoke a certain power which was always there, but it was implied, which is of controlling passage through an international navigation channel. And it has done so. And no one was able to prevent it from doing so. So that means that a new reality has emerged. And usually, international practice follows reality. It does not try to change that reality again. It follows a new realistic situation that has emerged. And as I said, we cannot expect to go back to this particular Southwest Asia, assuming that nothing has changed since the conflict broke out. I think the region has changed in many ways, and those changes are going to remain with us, and we will have to live with those changes.
So, I mean, in the immediate term, and just a couple of questions before we wind up, the threat of blockade, that the American threat of naval blockade, and Trump has set a deadline, which is in fact today at 7:30 p.m. India time. I mean, do you see the war reviving? Do you think it's going to get aggravated now? What is your sense? Because this is something of immediate concern. We can talk about the larger post-war regional order and all that, but this is the immediate.
My sense is that since Iran and the United States met at such a high level after an intense conflict, and then the tenor of the statements after this meeting suggests that the door is not closed to further meetings. Right. I think the inclination of both sides is not to embark again on a conflict, embark again on actual combat operations. This is my sense.
Right.
But you see, there are other things at work here about which we from the outside cannot really comment, and that is the domestic factors operating in both countries. What are the pressures on the Americans? What are the pressures on the Iranians?
Right.
About that, we don't know as much. My sense is the inclination of both leaders is not to embark on combat again because of the great damage which both have suffered and the unpredictable nature of the combat, which neither side had probably anticipated that things would go like this.
Right. So the last question, Ambassador Raghavan, which is this: you just spoke about a new regional order emerging, post-war regional order. What kind of region would it be? A new Iran, a new Israel, possibly a new America, and all that. But how do you see India, figuring into this calculation? How should India navigate this new regional order, which is likely to emerge, to protect its core interest?
I think for the moment we have to only observe, because we cannot predict what the future is going to be like. To some extent, we are relatively more insulated from this conflict than many others because of our size. But at the same time, we are deeply and negatively impacted by it. So in the first instance, we need an end to this conflict. And secondly, we need some kind of stable arrangements to emerge so that such kind of conflicts do not repeat themselves. More than that, I think we will have to, rather than rush into anticipating events and framing policies accordingly, because really there are many, many unforeseens. The future of hydrocarbon passage, whether it will continue to be in the same form as it is, or will that itself change? What will be the nature of the Iran Gulf Sheikdom's interface in future? All of these are pretty imponderable situations. I think we need to be much more realistic. And my big takeaway from this conflict, and as indeed it is from the earlier war, which is still continuing in Europe, is that please pay attention to your neighborhood.
Right.
Because neighborhood situations, when they go wrong, can take a very nasty turn. And both
Right.
these cases demonstrate that. Secondly, please don't think that military solutions are always, or, or kinetic solutions are always the best way to approach very, very fundamental differences in neighborhood geopolitics. It's time we be much more realistic about how we view ourselves and our South Asian neighborhood, drawing on certain lessons which can be extracted from both these conflicts.
Thank you so much. You're right. There's so many imponderables and very sensible, prudent advice to pay more attention to our immediate neighborhood. So the only certainty, it seems, is uncertainty, hoping that will get better and more predictable as we go along. Thank you so much, Ambassador Raghavan, for sharing your insights. We are very thankful to you.